Well, great news as the world's most loved and reliable phone is set to make a comeback. If you can't remember the Nokia 3310, then I guess says a lot about how old or young you are. Well, it was originally released in 2000 and marked the beginning of a new era in the world of mobile phones. It will be revealed at the Mobile World Congress later on this month. Tech expert Toby Shapshak joins me now in studio. Toby, I guess the 3310 is a bit of a diehard. You know, what has prompted this comeback?
Well, it's still speculation, I have to say at the outset. But nonetheless, what this has shown us is just how much love still exists for Nokia as a brand and for the iconic phones of the various eras when Nokia was selling 2 out of 3 phones in the world. And the 3310 was a very beloved phone. It stood out from the crowd because it only had one button. It was really tough. I think it had a week-long battery life.
Some say it could survive the apocalypse.
Well, exactly, I mean, it was just a tough, hard-wearing phone. It had a very simple operating system, very basic. You could search for contacts, send SMSs, do a few other odds and ends. But arguably the most important thing that it gave to the world was a little game called Snake.
I used to love Snake. It was the best thing about the 3310.
It's iconic. I've downloaded an app for my iPhone where you can play Snake in real time. But it just shows the endearing quality or the endearing value of a brand like Nokia, which still has a pretty decent market share in Africa with still very basic feature phones. I don't have a 3310 in my archive, but I do have this 2110, which was kind of around the same time. This was the kind of the top-end phone at the time, and the 3310 was kind of the bottom mid-range phone, and they were iconic.
Just hold your smartphone up against this phone, and it looks like generations apart, right?
Exactly.
Who would have
they're not dissimilar sizes, are they, these days? You know,
no.
The iPhone 7 Plus versus the 2110. But another iconic phone that came out was also the 6310, and this is my old 6310. It was a breakthrough phone in its day. You could store multiple contact numbers and even an email address under one contact. You could send emails. You had to send them through the SMS feature. It had this newfangled thing called Bluetooth, so you could use a Bluetooth headset or a Bluetooth car kit, and it had GPRS, the very first and most basic of the data mechanisms or data protocols to send information, data via your phone. So, but the 3310 was just iconic. Nokia sold a gazillion of them. Now, the figures are disputed, but they sold, hundreds of thousands, tens of millions of this single phone. It got upgraded. There was the ability to click on little face covers so you could personalize it, customize it with different covers, and it endures in the popular imagination. Just you can see in the last day since leaks emerged that this would possibly be launched in obviously a slightly different variation, but people are just loving it, aren't they?
But how much pressure would Nokia actually be under, Toby, to then come back into the market competing with glossy phones like that, and almost kind of staying true to the original design of the 3310? Well,
let's just look at the context of it. Nokia sold the company, Nokia itself, sold the brand Nokia and its handset division to Microsoft under former CEO Steve Ballmer. Ballmer thought he would take Windows Phone, Microsoft's operating system, and expand on it. The new CEO, Satya Nadella, decided not, and his focus is totally different. And they've licensed the ability to a new company called HMD Global, and they are the people who are making the phones. Nokia still has, I was speaking to someone last week about the market share Nokia still has in Africa for those very basic feature phones, those $10, $15 phones, or up to $30 phones that people still use, firstly because they're cheap, secondly because they have a good battery life, and thirdly they just carry on working. So if they released a phone like this, it would probably run a very basic version of an operating system, maybe a slimmed down version of Android. It doesn't need a very expensive processor. It doesn't need a very bright screen. It can use a whole bunch of cheap components and therefore be a very cheap phone. That is a good good way to get back into the marketplace. I mean, there was a time where Nokia had something like 38 or 40% of market share in Africa of feature phones, and the category just above feature phones, the Usher range, was incredibly popular. So I think that's probably what's going to happen. We do know there are going to be phones. The Nokia 5 is going to be a 5-inch or 5.5-inch phone launched at Mobile World Congress in about 2 weeks' time. And that will be obviously their play in the Android space. And maybe they're going to introduce this feature phone just to remind people that they're around and to capture the bottom of the market, who will ultimately upgrade to a smartphone, or a smallish smartphone, or a cheap smartphone. And of course, they're going to stick with a brand they know. There's a reason we all still love a brand like Nokia and the 3310, and that there's just been such an outpouring of emotion and sentimentality for this phone that for many people was their first ever cell phone.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see whether or not people are going to go out and get themselves a 3310 once it does relaunch. I know lots of people also liking the option of having a phone that perhaps people won't necessarily want to steal. So you're more free with it if you're walking around in public. Tech expert Toby Shapshak in studio with me. Your sport and your weather are coming up in a moment.